Welcome to episode 2 of Lifetime at Work, the podcast about work. We spend so much of our lives at work. How do we make it count? If you're considering a career change, curious about other jobs, or have a dream of working for yourself and owning your own business one day, any kind of business, this is the podcast for you. My name is Greg Martin, and I'm an entrepreneur, business strategy guru, mergers and acquisitions expert, teacher, and I live in the suburbs of Toronto. Every week, I talk to guests from the business world about the happiness and meaning they get from their jobs. The goal is to help you build more meaning, more purpose, and more fulfillment into your work. You have goals, I have goals, my guests have goals. So let's cue the intro music and talk about goals. If you're a fan of this podcast, head over to lifetimeatwork.com. There you'll be able to keep up with all the episodes, subscribe to our email list, as well as read some articles that I've written about our guests. Our guest today is Nilesh Gonsalves, and what you'll hear in talking through this conversation is us reference our investment banking days. That's where I started my career, coming out of, I did a business undergrad at Wilfrid Laurier University, and then coming out of there, I thought I'd wanted to do accounting, and I sort of discovered the world of finance and decided that made a lot more sense for who I was and what I wanted to do. And so I ended up getting a job at a company called Genuity. And investment banking, for anyone who's not overly familiar, I mean, basically we buy and sell companies. I was in the mergers and acquisitions group, and you hear a lot about that. And that's what we do. We really help big corporations buy things if they want to grow and buy new businesses or new assets, and then at the time where they want to sell, where they want to run a process and divulge the business, or there may be an owner who wants to sell, or just a corporate group that wants to get rid of their company, we help with that. And that's what we do. And so it's really a consulting job. We consult on mergers and acquisitions. And so that's what you'll sort of hear us talking about in this interview. Now, the interesting thing to know about investment banking is that it's incredibly long hours. You're kind of at the mercy of everyone in the company and the client as well. And so it just means that there's all these people giving you work all the time. And that's why it just ends up being a lot of work. And so we sort of talk about all those hours that we used to work. They were very typically 80-hour weeks, sometimes 100, sometimes 120 hours I did. Not often, but every once in a while you do a 120-hour week, and they are very intense. You're working, past midnight pretty much every day. You might get the part of a Saturday free, and then typically, you may have to go in on Sunday as well. It's kind of a 6 to 7 day week sort of job, and all day. And so that's what we'll be referencing in here, as you'll see. But Nilesh kind of took it a little bit further than I did. He went from investment banking. He then got another job at Goldman Sachs, who I'm sure you're familiar with. They're a big name brand in the investment banking industry. And then he continued his career on at Harvard, and then now in Silicon Valley, which we're about to talk about. What I think is really interesting as part of this interview is to talk about how he, despite that success, was not very clear what he wanted to do with his career. And he sort of applied to Harvard because he thought maybe he could get in, and he did. And it really helped him, I think, in figuring out what to do next. Now, everyone's going to look at this and say, okay, well, Harvard, sure, if I went to Harvard, I could figure everything out and it'd be super easy. And I think that's why this interview will be interesting for you. It's not necessarily easy. And I don't think just by getting into Harvard, you're going to have all the answers. So in this interview, it's really cool. You'll hear us talk a lot about back in the old days of investment banking. He used to sit actually right beside me, and we talked a ton, because that's all you can really do when you're working 100-hour weeks at such a young age, and missing your family and not seeing your friends all the time. But also note that the company he works for now came out of a kind of a cool idea. He worked at an insurance company who had, I guess, a lot of money, and he kind of came in to invest that insurance company's money. And what ended up happening was they developed this completely new company that does outsourced customer service, kind of the people that you call when you have a problem. They do that for a lot of different companies. They're an outsourced version of that. So it's kind of a neat little company, but we don't really get into that too much because Harvard is really the focus of this conversation. But I hope you enjoy my interview here with Nilesh Gonsalves. Nilesh, thank you so much for joining the Lifetime at Work podcast. We go way back, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I wanted to sort of have you probably start just explaining what you're doing now in your current role. You very quickly, to summarize what I know about you, you graduated from Queen's Business. You started in a career in finance. You then went to Harvard, and now you are working in Silicon Valley doing the startup thing that everyone sort of hears about and has talked about and is really cool and hot right now. So I wanted to ask you what your current job is, especially as a non-coder, non-engineer kind of guy in Silicon Valley. Is it as cool and as exciting as everyone says it is? And what do you do right now?
Yeah, so well, I hope it's really cool and exciting because spent the last couple of years at a startup, and we're a startup. The startup's called Simpler, and what we do is we provide customer service to all kinds of different businesses and companies, mainly in retail and food service. And what we do is we use what we call the human cloud to do it. So it's a network of people all over the United States, and some who are around the globe answering customer service tickets. So we're trying to disrupt a really old call center industry, and hopefully we're at the really early stages of something special. With regards to what I do for it, as you mentioned, I was in finance before. So when I joined a startup at a very early stage, of course, I had no discernible skills. So but you figure out and try and help where you can, and then once we started getting a decent client base, we needed someone to manage that client base. And so that's what I do right now, which is client success or client service. And it's been really good. I've learned a lot, and I do other things in my role, not just client success. And that's kind of what you have to do in a startup. So
Yeah, there's not a job for everything, and who knows what's going to happen. And you're mildly pivoting, if not completely pivoting, all the time. I imagine into where you need to go. Is for sort of what I understand from everything that I talk to people out there.
yeah. And but it's interesting to see what the trajectory is of the business going forward. I mean, we're growing really quickly. Like we had a 3x growth from last year to this year, and hopefully it'll be the same way going forward next year. And so I don't know what I could be doing next within the company, and but hopefully we're on that same great path. So yeah, it's good, but it's not like you know like startups itself are a risky proposition.
Yeah.
So and it's not smooth sailing. There are bumps along the road, and you face roadblocks. So it's exciting, but it's really, really challenging as well. So that's that's
And you're
something to.
3 years into it. Is
Yeah,
2017?
we started it in 2017, and it's kind of an odd way to start it in the corporate development team of a company called Assurian, and then we saw this as a great opportunity, and so we started it within that company, and now it's kind of on its own. So it's I guess it's a similar model to what Amazon did with AWS.
Right. Yeah.
But if we achieve maybe like one
Yeah.
1/50th of the success there, I think this will be a successful endeavor. So
Cool. Yeah, no, it's a cool idea. I would have thought it existed already. I was sort of surprised when you said that it was new and basically outsourcing the call centers and that sort of stuff, because it's a feature that you just don't really want to do, especially if it's 24 hours trying to train someone to do it or whatever. I've actually worked with some little small providers of services, I'll just say, and it's usually just the people in the business that kind of answer the chat
Yeah.
or whatever for it. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, but you would see that it would definitely be for a lot of businesses something that you'd want to outsource if you could, and just have someone do it that is just sitting there while running a
Yeah.
business are trying to do all these other things and really growing. So I totally get it. Like it's a cool idea. So do you fit in as a finance guy in Silicon Valley? Do you feel it's the land I feel like of coders, and I'm sort of intrigued. Like, say someone were interested in this, and they said, "Hey, I think this is the place to be." Right, Silicon Valley. There's so much
Yeah.
going on. There's all these companies. For someone though who doesn't do that, like doesn't really code, doesn't have an engineering per se background or experience or training, how hard is it to kind of get in? I don't know if you have any sense for it, and this would obviously be probably purely anecdotal, but was it easy for you? Do you think it would be easy for others?
Yeah, I think if your skills are applicable to the company, like, it's not like the company just requires coders
Right.
or engineers. Yeah. So I think, that is the core function of kind of building some of this technology. So it's super important. So, but, you take the example of someone who is really good at design, right? Like you would think, how can that kind of skill be applicable in a technology company? But it's actually so crucially important. So there is something called UX design, so the user experience design, which is actually a really, really important function, and it has so many elements of something that is very creative and related to design and art that is really important in the functionality of how a user kind of uses the product or the service of this technology company. So it's kind of transforming some of the skills that you may have that you wouldn't necessarily think that's technology related to you know and that those skills are very applicable to something in Silicon Valley. And so with my kind of skills, so naturally it would kind of go to a finance or a role, but let's say that isn't available.
Yeah.
Then you kind of steer yourself to the more, like, I've steered myself to the strategy side, and hey, what have I done in my past life that it could help with this company today. And so things like client service was one of them, and then general direction or leadership in the business is the other. And so those are some of the skills that I have applied that is valuable to startup, and frankly just rolling up my sleeves and doing what the startup needs, even though I'm not necessarily an expert at it.
Yeah.
You just sometimes need the horsepower to get yourself through it.
Yeah, and like a competent person, I guess, that understands the business and understand what's going on to sort of take the lead and do that, versus maybe someone who is, like you said, purely design focused, purely engineered focused, who is just amazing at what they do, but you're not able to see sort of the big picture per se all the time. So I get it. Yeah. Okay. That's actually,
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, those are like two ways of going about it. One is like a specialized skill. Other is like, you're kind of good or okay at several things, and you can figure stuff out that you don't necessarily need a specialized skill to kind of bank on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to then now kind of go and talk about Harvard and your experience getting an MBA, deciding to do that. So you basically had worked how many years before you started applying for
business
the MBAs?
school?
Business school?
Yeah. I'd worked about 5 years, and I was just going by what people suggest. And the thing is different for everyone. So I think the recommended ranges are anywhere between 3 to 7 or 2 to 7. Now it's getting kind of earlier. But what I would say is, people should go when they're ready. And sometimes I think I'm glad I had those 5 years of work experience, because frankly, I, I don't know if, like, after 1 or 2 years of work experience, if I was mature enough to go to business school and to actually um, like absorb you know some of the like lectures, that not lectures, but the classes that you take, as well as the people that you meet, and then kind of your outlook, what you kind of want for your career.
Yeah.
I think you gain a sense of maturity from those work experiences to actually kind of decide, hey, what do I want to do next, as opposed to what looks good on my resume. And I think out of undergrad, I was thinking about, hey, what looks the best on my resume? But business school kind of helps you, hey, what's going to make me happy, where I have an impact for the rest of my career?
Yeah, like that's kind of the point of the podcast, I think, is kind of getting to that. And so I did think that it would be interesting to talk about you deciding to go and do an MBA, because it was a life of finance that you had, and you and I, that was my life too, was
Yeah.
basically doing that. And I never really considered business school I didn't because I didn't really know what else I wanted to do, and I also felt like I had a business degree undergrad, and I thought, I don't want to do. I don't know. I feel like I would learn the same things, but I think there's a lot more that you could get out of it, and a lot more that you could do with that. And I totally do appreciate that. It just never seemed like the right thing for me. But did you approach it as I need something different, or how did you approach it in terms of your career?
Yeah.
And you wanted a different direction, and you figured, okay, well, let's roll the dice and see, and try to figure this out with a change.
Yeah, what's funny, I remember our early days in investment banking together, and you were actually great. You kind of like a mentor to me in my first year, and it was super helpful because it was challenging, right out of school, and you're kind of thrown into the fire in investment banking. You're working really, really long hours, and the work's not like super challenging. It's more tedious and sticking with it, and it's a bit of a grind, but it gives you a really good base levels of skills, right? And like I said, I was thinking more so, hey, what looks good on my resume?
Yeah.
What are the skills that I need to get or learn so I can feel secure, and then maybe figure out my career, and banking was a good place for that. But I didn't feel like I wanted to do this for the rest of my life, and some people do, and that is great, and they should keep doing that. But for me, it wasn't really the case, and my experience was just kind of limited in on that street, on Bay Street. So I worked in investment banking. I was working with you at Canaccord Genuity, and then I moved on to Goldman, and then I worked in private equity. So I think the buildings were adjacent to each other. So it
Yeah.
was a very limited in terms of exposure and people, and so you didn't get to see what's out there. And I had a few friends that went to business school, and it just exposed them to different things. So one, I was like, hey, I'm not going to do an MBA in Canada. I'm going to do it in the US, and I'm going to see what I'll be exposed to, different kinds of people, and I can see what opportunities are available for me to do. And I think, like most people who want to do an MBA, you don't really know what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Right.
So it helps you kind of figure it out, and you kind of get credit for doing it. So those were some of the reasons that I considered. And you want to make it count. Like, I think the network is really important. So I was like, to what you said, had already kind of had a business undergrad degree, so it's kind of overlap. So what experience could make it better if I do choose to do an MBA? And so the network really counts, and who the kinds of people you'd be exposed to, like the diverse backgrounds of those people. So they're coming from engineering, the military, all these kinds of different places to get you that perspective. And it would be helpful in judging, hey, where do I want to go next with my career? And there's a bit of a prestige factor too, that you want to make that MBA count. So why not try and go to the best school, because those, and if you want to try and go to some of the top schools, those opportunities will be potentially available for you after.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like I mean, and Harvard, you feel like as if someone that reputation wise, at the very least, is the best place to go. Frankly, I mean, it's kind of where you want, for sure. And so when I heard when I heard you were going there, I was like, well, it's obvious. If you can get in, I understand.
Yeah,
It all makes sense when you're going because. But did you know? Like, was it more? Did you have, I want to get something out of this, or this is the thing that I want out of it, or was
yeah.
it just like everyone says this is the place to go, and everyone says I should do this, and it's kind of a no brainer in theory, so I should do it, or did you actually try to investigate, and did people actually try to pitch you on it, or I imagine they don't have to
Yeah,
pitch.
yeah. So I remember when I was in, like, in undergrad, and even just out working in banking, I was like, oh man, I would never have a shot of going there, right?
I never
Um,
considered it. I've like never even really thought of it until you went, and then I was like, oh, should I try that? I think,
yeah,
and then I
yeah,
immediately said no, and then okay, but
and that's the thing, you don't know unless you try.
no,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I think a lot of people have that mindset. And it's and if you don't believe, I think you can do it, then how is someone else who's reviewing your application gonna believe that? And but it's also, you kind of think, oh, like, here's, and at the same time you want to be realistic too. So with my work experience, and with my profile, let me ask people who've gone there, do I have a shot? And they'll kind of tell you honestly whether you can get in or not. And I knew a few people who went, and they're like, yeah, you've got a good chance. You've got to work. It's hard to get in.
Yeah.
And part of it's getting lucky too, in the breaks that you get in your life. And I think I was really, really lucky. I worked with people like you, and then after that, I got great experience. Got to go to Goldman, which is a brand name on my resume, and then that led to a private equity opportunity. And then I was involved in my community, and all these kinds of things um, helped me. And then I also had great people in my corner, so writing references, who worked with me. So all that stuff kind of helped me put sort of my best pitch forward to Harvard. And they, fortunately, I got an interview. And once you get an interview, I think it's like a 50-50 kind
Yeah,
of
cool.
chance. And so, yeah, it's just a combination of luck, and some of the things, the way things work out in your life. And yeah, fortunately, they said yes. So
Yeah.
once I got that acceptance, I was like, oh yeah, I'm not giving them any second thoughts of taking this back. I accepted
I'm
kind of
in.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. So what I guess I kind of understand what the and most people I think do the process of applying, but there's a component of there which I think is interesting of a written component. You have to write something because they will see your background and where you've worked and sort of your resume and your grades and all that stuff. But you kind of have to put it together in some sort of story, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
apply and I really an essay, a life essay of
Yeah.
here's what my life has been about so far, and here's where I now want to go, and here's how Harvard can
Yeah.
kind of do that, right? I think, and that's kind of the idea. And I imagine that people don't just write, I want to make the most amount of money possible, so please let me in. I feel like
Yeah.
that's not an effective essay topic. So you really have to, and that's what they want, right? They want people with a story that are going somewhere that I think Harvard can help fulfill, right? So like,
Yeah.
what do people write about? What did you, I don't know how personal it is, but what was your sort of overall sort of general theme, and what are the themes that people sort of do and talk about to get in? And I really have no idea. I've never written one, I never thought, but I just do think it's an interesting exercise to go through in terms of thinking about, okay, well, here's when I reflect on my life and then look to the future, here's what I'm about, and let's write that down.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. It's a lot of self-reflection, and I remember the essay topic was it was so broad, and it was kind of scary how broad it was because if I can remember, they said, okay, we've seen your grades, your test scores, your references, and we've read your application over and over. What else do you want us to know about you?
Right.
So yeah, so it's really really broad, right? So you don't want to like focus too much on your work because they've already kind of seen that, and you know, even your university history, they know what you've done in terms of not only your grades, your extracurricular stuff. So they want to know kind of you and what makes you kind of special or different. And I think self-reflection is important, and you kind of go over, hey, what are all the things that I've done in my life? And I would strongly recommend to people that, you know, I know people get a lot of help and professional help and stuff like that. I didn't do any of that. I just kind of told my story. Then I had a lot of people look at it and kind of critique or give me advice on it. But that was a really helpful process. And I realized that I did have a unique story, and maybe I was kind of cool or different. But you don't necessarily realize it. So and I don't want to go into my full life story or
Right.
the whole essay because that may be boring. But you know, one thing that I started off with was how I was born in Kuwait, and I went through the Gulf War, and then my family came to Canada because of that, you know, and
Right.
that was different. And what a wonderful opportunity to come to Canada, and what a great country it was, to you know, to help me get to the point where I am today. And it was kind of a beat the odds kind of situation, you know, with the work experience that I have, and kind of what I went through. You know, I say all these wonderful things about Canada and stuff, and then I was
Yeah.
I was going and applying to school in the U.S.
You moved away from us.
Yeah,
You've never been back, I feel like. Yeah.
yeah. It was pretty ironic, but that was good and a different story. And then how I framed it is, you know, not only focused on, I spoke a bit about my work, but the stuff that I was doing with the community where I grew up in Scarborough. And I was an immigrant, and so I was trying to help immigrant kids in high school with jobs and careers, and give career talks and stuff. So I saw a lot of myself in some of these kids. And then I weaved it into kind of the aspirations that I had for my career. And I think, you know, a cool line to say, hey, you know, I beat the odds before, and to achieve these goals, I'm gonna look to beat the odds again. So it was just a nice way of doing it, and then it kind of sets you up for some of the challenges that you have in your life. And because if you have certain aspirations or goals, there are going to be challenges along the way. Like nothing comes easy, and you know, you're kind of going after it. And I think those are kind of people that, you know, they're looking for. They're people who aren't necessarily just satisfied with the status quo. So so yeah, so that was kind of how I did my essay, and went about it. It was like probably, I don't know, 70 to 85 versions
Yeah, I
later.
know.
So
Right. No kidding. You really, yeah, you're really trying to capture it. I imagine you could either think you have nothing or just drone on forever. And I can totally see both of those happening, and you need to find that perfect balance. I totally appreciate it. But yeah, that sort of makes sense to me. I think that's again, a cool exercise to sort of think about what your life is about, or what you're trying to make it about, and vis-a-vis your career, I think too. But it sounds like you didn't have necessarily a lot of specific career stuff in there in terms of what you were trying to do. It was more of a, because if you come to business school to try to find what your thing is, you can't say, well, my goal is to become CEO of a, XYZ type company. Like, you can't really say that, because the whole point, I think, is to be a little bit curious about the world and everything, right? Do you think that's true, or do you think people can go either way?
Yeah, I think you want to have some sort of idea for the application.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
in that process, and I did, I said things like, oh, I would love to start my company, or things like that. And then in business school, once you're in there, you're kind of figuring it out. So it's good that you have those aspirations, but sometimes your path towards the aspirations can be a bit different than what you necessarily put in the application. So
Right.
so yeah, that's one kind of difference that I would say, and the schools get it, but I think the admissions committee kind of wants to see, hey, you've got a lot of drive and goals, but the things that you've done in your past and what has shaped you can kind of help you get there. Because I think for them, like, past performance and unique things that you've achieved is probably a good indicator of future performance.
Right.
And so the goal, the kind of the aspirational thing that you have in there isn't maybe necessarily that important, but you've reflected enough and you've done enough in your life that they feel pretty confident that you're gonna achieve something great. So
Yeah.
yeah. One actually interesting way to look at it is they're making a bet too, right? So
They don't. Yeah, they only have so many spots, and
they,
they don't want. Yeah, they don't want to screw it up
yeah,
either. Yeah.
yeah, they only have so many spots, and their graduates are reflective on their reputation and also their endowment. So they are making a bet that you're going to be really successful in the future, and you're going to give back either in some form of monetary way, community way, that and then also way that reflects really good on them, because they're also a going concern too. So yeah, those 900 spots for them are precious and coveted too. So
Do you get, so, like, everyone who does an American MBA that says, you us Canadians, we don't appreciate all that's out there. The exposure, all the different types of jobs and everything. I guess that's just because there's just such a limited number of corporations and companies and population in Canada. What did you get that? Did you get a lot of, oh my God, there's so much more when you were there? And how do they sort of
yeah,
help you find that stuff? I sort of think, sometimes I often think that there's actually a lot in Toronto. I feel like there's a ton already, but obviously there's a ton more too. I wanted to ask the question.
yeah, like you definitely feel that way when you kind of live and work in the US or have gone to school here. The US is I love Canada. I don't want this to be coming across as bashing Canada, but the opportunities, there are 350 million people in the US. There are about 30 to 35 million people in Canada. So it's roughly 10 times the size, right?
Yeah.
It's also a really, really diversified economy, the US is. And it is, and I think Canada's getting there in terms of being like a hub of innovation and like more different kinds of businesses. So you see companies like Shopify coming up. But traditionally Canada has been natural resource and finance kind of focus, right? That's been the core part of the economy. And so that's why, like, where the difference in the US, you see, like, when you think about the biggest companies out there and most innovative companies, they traditionally have been very US based, like Silicon Valley has produced a lot of it. And they're, some of the most of the biggest companies in the world are US based. So that's why you see kind of, there are many kinds of different opportunities. Like the opportunity I got out of business school, like to do corporate development in kind of the San Francisco Bay Area. It didn't really exist in Canada. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, I can go back to Toronto, and I wouldn't mind doing that, or I can try something new here that is different and doesn't really exist back home. And so I was like, I gotta try it, otherwise I'm gonna regret it.
Yeah.
And so, and then you think about, oh, why did you go to school in the States? So you want to try and these interesting opportunities and challenge yourself. And so that's why that's why, like, I would say it's good to just figure that out, because you can always go back and see to your hometown or home place, and what's there.
Yeah.
So and so maybe in the future, some sort of path could lead me back to Canada. But I wouldn't want to be in my 60s or 70s and say, oh darn, that job opportunity that I got in San Francisco way back in the day, I should have taken that. It could have, what could have been, right? I never
Yeah.
would have known. So yeah.
Yeah, and like if I remember back to the investment banking days, you and I were together. We sat beside each other. I don't know if the whole time you were there, but a good chunk of it, anyways. And we were working like crazy. Like it was intense. There was a lot of we got up. There's 100-hour weeks. There were some 80s. Those weren't too bad. There was
Yeah.
120s though. There was all-nighters. There was
Yeah.
it was just an intense. And I remember talking to you a lot about that. And then you left at some point to go to Goldman. And I remember I enjoyed keeping in touch with you, because even though I was working kind of 100-hour weeks, I would call you sometimes and you were working harder, and it kind of made me feel good that there was someone else out there that I knew that was like, oh well, at least I'm not working as much as Nilesh. Like that's it was sort of this thing. But people in our industry, so many of us, still are just working like crazy. Like we're just going all out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think we missed anything? Do you feel like you missed anything? I mean, talking directly about that in your 20s, like of these spry times, these pre-COVID days where you could do anything, you could go anywhere. Like, do you ever think back that we missed something because we were working too hard and not, I don't know, traveling or I don't know, jumping around to different jobs or doing something else that
Yeah.
I'm kind of, I don't know, I wonder, because it was fun in some ways, and then just kind of also a little bit confining, I guess, in others.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, I remember, when I think about it now, I remember what you actually told me in kind of my first year of banking. I think it was your second year. You said, you know what? I actually don't mind the job, and it's fine, but it only hurts when you miss family events or friend events that are kind of special. And I remember, I think you had your dad's birthday or something like that, and you may have missed a bit of it, and I think stuff like that kind of hurt. And
Yeah.
so I thought the same way too. And partially I think when we missed, because I think I missed a few things, whether it's friends or family, and I regret that part of it. Because that is hard to get back. And I remember actually in our first year in banking, I actually left to go on vacation to India for my cousin's wedding, and I was actually so glad I did that, because like those memories are really etched in my mind. And I was really considering not going. I was like, this is my first year on the job. This
Yeah.
looks really, really bad for me to go. And we're probably in the midst of a recession, so there's a good chance I could get fired. So, but I still went, and I'm so glad that I did, you know, looking back. And, you know, I was like, I'm going to put in the time when I get back. So, um, so yeah, stuff like, but I did end up missing some of those moments. And, you know, I regret it because I don't know what some of those moments are, but those moments could have been really, really special. So that's the big part I regret. But then there's a trade-off to that too. So, you know, the skills that I got from doing that job, and, you know, kind of the ability to work hard and just grind things out. We had that stupid phrase, "Oh, you're a grinder," you know, you grind things out, like it's a badge of honor to be working till like 1 a.m. in the morning. But I think that was good. And, you know, it's helped me with my life today, with some of the skills I developed. It helped me get into school. It helped me get out here into, you know, in the job that I am. And I met my wife out here. So I'm super, you know, grateful for all that. So that part, I don't think I'd trade away or do things differently.
Yeah, I go back and forth. I don't know. I think your point is good though, that I don't know what I missed because I was doing something else. And
yeah,
and
you were at work.
It wasn't like I was just sitting around doing nothing. I was busy, and it was fun in a lot of ways. It was fun to be working with. I mean, we were working with CEOs and CFOs and big companies right from, you know, our early 20s, which was cool. And that was sort of the price to get that and get that experience and be there. And yeah, I felt like I just needed to do it. I think I felt like I hadn't worked hard that much in my life before that. And I liked it. I think I felt successful, I think, in many ways by doing it, by having some place to be all the time for some reason. And so I like that. Eventually I think I found that less so, where I then said, okay, well, I think there's things I need to do. I can't just do this forever. I need more time to do these other things that I want to achieve in life. And I'm even in that now. But yeah, I don't necessarily regret it either, but I think your point is good, that I just don't know what I missed. I don't know. I guess it was just, could have done something else, but that could have sucked too, or that could have sucked and this could have been better. I have no idea.
Yeah. No, it's hard to tell. And I don't think you want to regret things too much. But, you know, kind of make the most of, because the opportunity that we got, to your point, to work with all those business leaders at an early age, you know, was really important and good. And a lot of other people would have killed to have that opportunity too.
True.
But,
fine. Go to your dad's birthday. I'll take over here. You know, like, I'm sure. You know, and that was the case. You post a job and you get hundreds of people applying to it. It's crazy. I think it was definitely sort of coveted, and you kind of, I think, miss that in a lot of ways, where you just don't even really realize it when you're in it. But in a lot of ways, that was what people want. But I think that's just the thing. I think that lots of other people think it's success, and I don't know. Going back and thinking about it, I've done the odd career day, especially because my wife's a teacher, so she tries to corral me into those things now. And, you know, speaking, I get the most engagement and the most interest when I start with how many hours I work. It really, really kind of pops at the beginning of the conversation. We're like, oh, what were you doing? People do that? Like, you know, as a high school student who watches TV and video games and all that sort of stuff, you really have no idea what the real world is like. So when you hear that, you kind of perk up. But I don't think it's something that people necessarily aspire to all the time. But I think that at a certain point, all of a sudden I did. And yeah, you did too. So anyways, it was cool. I think now though, but looking at, you know, your essay and what you did and the Harvard thing and now where you are and all those things, like, you needed to do that. You couldn't have just kept up with the video games and stayed home and done all these other things and had this.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten in because I'm not smart enough to write code or start my own business, or do something really really special. So this was, looking back, this was the path to, if we're talking to business school here, um, the investment banking, private equity path was kind of a standard path to
Yeah,
get to this point. So yeah, should be grateful for that. And I remember, I think I was joking around with you, or one of our friends, at work, colleagues at work, who's became one of our close friends, Michael Greaves. I don't know if you're still in touch with him, but I think I told him, man, just think about it, because we were there, I think, at one time at 2 a.m. or something like that, and it was just really miserable and tough. And I was like, you know what, there are probably people off in way off positions. I think there was still like a war in Iraq going on. I was like thinking about the soldiers there, Canadian and US soldiers who've been deployed there. I was like, that's probably way worse than this. I think I'll take this, and then you go back and do your work. So yeah, it's jokes like that, or camaraderie like that made those jobs actually, uh, kind of fun too, from what I remember.
for sure. I definitely think that relationships are huge in terms of that, and just in terms of your enjoyment for any job that you're doing. That's going to lead into my next question about what makes you happy and your happiness in the years that you've been working and where you are now versus where you've been. What makes you happy from a day-to-day basis in your job? Have you thought about that as a question?
Yeah, no, I have. Like I thought about that a lot, and just thinking about what I wanted to do, and just with my career. And I think that the biggest thing that comes to mind is the impact that your work has on one, the organization that you're in, and then also the people, in the organization. And then, so that was always challenging, in like starting my career in investment banking and stuff. Like, a lot of the work that we did, I don't necessarily know how much impact it had. And so, whereas here now, in my current role today, like almost everything that I do and every decision that I make has an impact on the company in both a positive way and a negative, could be, if I make mistakes, in a negative way as well. And I've got a team of people who I'm developing too, and their careers are really important. And also, I'm like, in my previous career, is I it was more individualistic. Like, I had to do well or perform well to get a great outcome. Here, I need to rely on other people to actually accomplish our goals. And so that is kind of a different challenge, like a larger team to accomplish your goals. And being a really good manager is very different from being a very good individual contributor. And I often think, like, certain managerial mistakes are made in the corporate world, because you actually promote people based on, how they individually perform, but they may not that individual person may not necessarily be a good manager. So, you know those the two things those things, the impact you have on the organization and the impact you have on people, I think, you know contributes in a big way to my happiness. And so I feel kind of jubilant when, our company succeeds. But I also feel the pain when we fall short of our goals. Whereas before, I don't like. I think it'd be disappointing, but I think the individual stuff mattered more. Here, the company stuff matters a lot.
So do you have have you thought about it? Like, say you were to update your Harvard essay or something like that, and reflect on what you now want your career goals to be, and where you, I know it's hard. It's hard to say, okay, I want to be here because there's so many unknowns,
Yeah.
but thinking generically as an achievement that you want or anything, do you have that, or are you still in a mindset of I'm young, I'm learning, I want opportunities, and I know I want impact, and as long as I have that in whatever role I am doing, then that is good. I both answers are valid. I wanted that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I would like to be. So it isn't a position necessarily that now that I want to achieve. So I want this company to be a really big company. Like, so, goals are, potentially a $1 billion company. So that's what the goal is. And, I want to be, so right now I am part of that leadership team, but when we achieve that, I want to still be a part of that leadership team that has achieved that success. So going from a leader from a small business from its infancy to a very um, to a really big business that is contributing a lot to society in multiple ways. So like adding a lot of value in one, the services we provide, and then two, also the work, the kind of the work and the development of people that we provide as well. So I think those things will like give me, I think, a lot of happiness if I were to go back and kind of change my essay around a bit.
I'm not going to ask you to do that, but thank you for the answer. And I really appreciate catching up with you and being on the podcast. It was great. There's a bunch of things I didn't know that I learned about as well. And I hope the audience takes away some of that as well, because it's, again, a completely great option to go to Harvard and if you've got it. But I think there's a lot of things that you can do if you can't, that can get you in some pretty cool places if you're willing to take a risk and you're willing to try. So really appreciate the time, and it was great chatting.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Greg. And hey, it's a great podcast you're running here, and I'm glad to be a part of it too, and wish you the success. And I'm sure hopefully people like what I said, but your future guests are going to be even more insightful, and you're doing a great job.
Thanks, man. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Nilesh Gonsalves. One of my takeaways was I've always sort of had this mild little dream of going to Harvard. I never really tried for it because I never thought I would get in or needed it or could do it or wanted to spend the time to do it. But it's just, you hear about it on TV and all those sorts of things. And so it was interesting to almost live vicariously through Nilesh as he talks about his experience. But really what I came away with it from is that it was just like any other MBA, and designed for him anyways to help find what he wanted to do next and what he really wanted to do for his job, which is really something you don't even have to do an MBA for. You can take that approach in many different ways. Thanks for joining this week's podcast. If you could go to your favorite podcast platform, subscribe, and also rate me, that would be fantastic. We are now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever you're using, we probably are on. Visit lifetimeatwork.com to keep up to date with us. You can also subscribe to the email list there. And until next time, I've been Greg Martin, and this is the Lifetime at Work podcast. Stay happy.